Bring in Mark Halperin, esteemed political journalist of many bylines with us. And he tweeted out basically this playbook on Thursday. This was going to happen over the weekend, that Joe Biden was going to drop out. But he said he wouldn't endorse Kamala Harris. In the end, Joe Biden did endorse Kamala Harris. Mark, first of all, congrats on getting the scoop in reporting how this was going to go. What do you make of two things? One, that this was a paper statement, not an address to the nation. And number two, that there is an endorsement of Kamala Harris.
Well, on the second point, I understand from my sources, he wasn't planning to endorse in order to allow her to have distance from his administration to do what she said in her own statement, which is to earn it. But after I published what I published, there was a lot of heat. A lot of people called the president and his advisors and said, you have to endorse her. It would look horrible if you didn't. So I think that changed from Thursday when I reported it till today. Overall, you know, this is a president who, had he gone out before the cameras, I think could have been either teary or angry or both, as well as COVID afflicted. And I don't think any of those would have been a particularly good look. Only a written statement could hit the exact right tone, the right exact substance that he and his advisors wanted. As we know, part of the reason Joe Biden is not proceeding is because he does not excel these days, especially in that kind of format.
What does he want his legacy to be? What are they trying to create here?
Well, look, he wants his legacy to be beating Donald Trump in 2020 and then passing a lot of major bipartisan legislative bills. He doesn't want his legacy to be someone who is blamed for Donald Trump's return to the White House. And that's a lot what this is about today. But from my reporting, he's got a lot to process. This was forced upon him by one of his closest political friends, Nancy Pelosi, and others. And so this decision was made on a deadline in a way that, again, I think leaves him with a lot to think about. And although he has no intention, as I reported on Thursday, to step down, as he reaffirmed today, it's going to be a lot of pressure from Republicans to get him to stand down. And while he thinks he can resist that, he also thought he'd be able to resist the pressure to give up the nomination.
Yeah, fantastic reporting and perspective. George, to that point, we look at the White House. President isn't there. Now, presidents go on vacation all the time, but President Biden spent an inordinate amount of time away from the White House. Are Americans right to take a step back and forget the politics for a second, but ask their president who's running things?
Of course they're right to do so. The fact is that everyone around the president, who are presumably his advisors, said until about 2 this afternoon that what happened at 2 this afternoon was not going to happen. The men in Tehran, Beijing, Moscow, and North Korea are watching this. This is a dangerous moment, Leland. We are distracted by the nuances of presidential politics. There are huge stakes out there. And watching a nation in disarray, and that's the way we look to other people, is dangerous. Now, I don't think we're in disarray. I think the Democratic Party has taken a step toward bringing order here. It will not appear to the world or to the American voters as order if they say, okay, you're right, we've been wrong all along about Joe Biden, but let's pick Joe Biden's chosen successor. That's why his endorsing of Kamala Harris was a huge mistake. He just took off his shoulders the burden of all his difficulties and placed them on her shoulders.
Mark, I'll give you the last word here. And I think this is important because as much fun as it is to talk about whether Kamala Harris gets the nomination or not, George brings up a point that there are higher stakes than who is the next president, which is America's standing in the world. Does Joe Biden's team have a plan to reassert to the nation that he is in control, that there is a captain of the ship right now, number one, and number two, that we can believe his team? Because there seems to be two teams. There's the team that decided he was going to drop out and wrote the letter and everything else overnight and into this morning. And then there was the team on television this morning telling everybody that that wasn't going to happen.
Well, campaigns and governments lie when it's in their interest to do so. That's why the press needs to be vigilant. I think it's going to be a lot easier on him to not have to be a full-time candidate and a full-time commander-in-chief and a full-time president. And I think they'll be able to stage manage him and rest him as needed to allow him to serve out his term if he's able to withstand the pressure to step down.
All right. Mark, thank you very much. Great reporting. We'll keep following it. Certainly some incredible stuff over the past week. Mr. Will, as always, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.